Lots of cool stuff coming up. We're going to talk to Glenn Nielsen here in a few moments. We're going to call him on Skype audio and chat with him. And thanks for joining us here on our big broadcast. We love it. You love it. And we're going to get to Earl. I think what's his last name? I just wrote down Earl. Earl? What? Earl? That's it? Is it my cousin Earl? I don't know. Anybody remember that show, My Cousin Earl? You probably don't.
This is Glenn Nielsen.
Hey, Glenn, how are you? It's James Lowe with KJ Radio. How are you today?
I'm doing just great. How are you doing, James?
Pretty good, actually. I apologize for calling a little late. We were just finishing up with our previous interview, but we've got you now. We've got you live. We've got Glenn Nielsen with us today. Military aircraft of yesterday is the topic here on our big broadcast. Combat flying expert and recipient of the Distinguished Flying Cross Award with us today, Glenn Nielsen. And like anything, the development of military aircrafts have advanced over the years, thus giving pilots better ways to navigate and carry out missions. The military has created some of the greatest aircraft, each with a different purpose in mind, especially in the years from 1970 to 1990. Not every aircraft was created equal, though, and each airframe was custom made to carry out a select mission effectively. What were some of the finest details? We've got with us today combat flying expert Glenn Nielsen. He graduated at the top of his pilot training class and has flown over 200 combat missions while being awarded by the Distinguished Flying Cross 7 times. His expertise is going to guide us today throughout the different types of aircrafts during his involvement, as well as talking about those that he flew during his time in the Air Force. And this one thing I like about Glenn is that he's got actual experience. Unlike who a lot of people have, I think it was the head of the Navy that President Obama recently, a couple years ago, nominated this woman to lead the Navy, and she'd never been on a boat. Glenn's actually flown things. So if anybody wanted to come along and put you in the Air Force again and make you the head of the Air Force, you'd be totally overqualified.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. I think there's a lot more that goes into it than just flying airplanes.
Now, Glenn, what kind of training exactly did you go through to become a pilot in the Air Force? Because I know that you probably had to go through a lot of physical and mental, and then, of course, learning how to fly the various planes and jets and helicopters and all that stuff. Take us through your training, my friend.
Well, it starts out, obviously, with the physical to make sure that you're physically qualified.
Yes.
You've got the eyesight, the hearing, the coordination, the basic health in order to be able to handle the stress of flying.
Okay.
And then once that begins, the way it works now, I think, is probably a little different than it was for me. But we started out in basically a Cessna 172, and
Wow.
we flew 36 hours in that aircraft, soloed in it, just to basically get our feet wet and make sure that, we enjoy flying, and that was really something we wanted to do. Then we moved into the T-37, which was a side-by-side trainer.
Okay.
And the student would sit on the left, the instructor would sit on the right, and it was a jet, subsonic jet. It wasn't supersonic by any means, but it was fully capable, and you could get out and you could do crazy things like spin it, so you could learn how to get out of a spin if you ever got into one. And, obviously learning to land with retractable landing gear, because a Cessna the gear stays down all the time.
Yeah.
And, all these things, it's a building process. So you get used to one thing, and then they add another unknown or another unexperienced. And after the T-37, we went to the T-38, which is a twin-engine, high-speed, near fighter type aircraft. So it's really good for training because it's got all that capability, and
that's pretty cool.
It's really a lot of fun. And that's where you build out your skills. And the majority of our time in pilot training was in the T-38.
Yeah.
So, at the end, basically we were in pilot training for a year. You went through all three of those aircraft in the course of that year.
Holy smokes.
And then, yeah.
Wow.
It was challenging, but it's also, if you love to fly, there's nothing that can beat it. You get to learn how to fly in formation. You get to learn how to do maneuvers with the aircraft, how to make the aircraft perform at its maximum capability. And then at the end of that training, after that year, we were given the opportunity to select what kind of an aircraft we wanted to fly for our first assignment. And because I was near the top of my class, I got to pick the F-4, and I picked the F-4 with a pipeline assignment to Southeast Asia, which meant that I came to Tampa, Florida. I spent 6 months learning how to fly the airplane, employ it, drop bombs with it, air-to-air, whatever, all the capabilities that it had. And then my next assignment was in Southeast Asia.
Wow. That's a heck of a deal. We've got a great guest with us today. He joins us live here on our broadcast, Glenn Nielsen with us today. He is talking about and taking us through some of the different combat and non-combat military aircraft of yesterday. And wanted to get him on today to chat about this because we've had a lot of folks who have asked us about various things, and I always try to get experts on here because I'm not going to be like some of these talk radio guys who are like, well, I don't know anything about this, but I'm going to get on their radio and tell everybody about it. Glenn Nielsen with us today. He is the founder of Pics in the Glen. He's also a author, Photobomb. Take your family photos from ordinary to outstanding. We'll talk to you a little bit about that book as we go here on the broadcast. Now, you flew a lot of these planes. What was your favorite aircraft to fly?
Oh, I think the F-4, the Phantom, was by far, the most exciting. You knew it was around. It made a lot of noise, which is not real popular today, but it had a lot of power. At the time I was flying it, it was the premier fighter aircraft in the world.
That's
and
cool.
Of course, obviously, there have been many that have come since then to exceed that capability. But it was certainly respected by those who flew it and by those who opposed those who flew it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. It's Glenn Nielsen. He's with us today here on our big broadcast, coast to coast, border to border on iHeartRadio, TuneIn, iTunes, Radio Loyalty, Stitcher, and, of course, 50-plus AM FM stations across the country and around the world. Radio Xenu today, and RadioXenu.com for more information. And what types of missions did you do in some of these aircrafts? What was some of the different missions you carried out, my friend?
Well, in Southeast Asia, we were primarily bombers. So we were going after strategic targets in North Vietnam, primarily bridges, factories, things that were providing strategic support to the war effort. I personally did not get into any air-to-air other than when I was defending myself against somebody else trying to kill me.
Yeah.
But basically, after I left Southeast Asia in a normal fighter squadron, you get, a general array of training. You train in air-to-air, you train air-to-ground, you train dropping bombs, you train fighting airplanes one-on-one, you fight, train electronic warfare, all of that.
That's pretty cool. That is pretty cool. Now, when you go to put some of these various missions and things together, and you're up there, flying, whether it's a plane, helicopter, what have you. Take me through the process of going from point A to point B, essentially, with some of these missions.
Well, today it's very, very simple to get from point A to point B because we've got GPS and all that's in the aircraft also. When I was flying, it was what they call tactical air navigation, or TACAN, We did have some LORAN, which was an electronic method of identifying where you were in 3 dimensions. But primarily it was, pay attention to where you're at and where you're going, and you'd flight plan out the plan, and you'd fly the plan. Now, if you're talking through a mission and what went into a mission, I can talk about that also.
Yes. I would like you to follow up there and kind of take us through this without giving away, obviously, the details that the average person doesn't need. It's got to take us through the schematics here of how this worked.
Sure. A normal combat mission would start for us about 4 o'clock in the morning, which is when you'd start doing target study. And you'd go in, you'd spend an hour to an hour and a half looking at all the available photographs, maps, charts, any information that was available about the target, why you were hitting it, where you needed to hit it. And all of that information you would just study until you basically had it memorized. Then you would sit down in a major group. So you're talking about a typical mission could have as many as 100 aircraft in it.
Yeah.
And all of this coordination would go across not only for where we were at our base, but all the bases in Southeast Asia. So you would have a meeting to talk about the overall plan for the day. And then you would get into a briefing of just the 4 aircraft that were part of your flight and what specifically your part was in that big picture that you had just talked about.
Yeah.
After that, you'd go get dressed. You'd get out to your airplane, pre-flight it, get ready. There was a specific time that you had to be ready to take off. You took off at that time, went up and then rendezvoused with a tanker, and then you would get refueled, top off your tank so that you had all the gas it was possible to have. And then at a given time, you'd drop off the tanker and you'd head into the target. And you'd fly into the target, and really, I would say the worst part of the entire mission was the time up until they started to shoot. Because once they started shooting, you knew what you had to do. It's kind of like one of these things. The unknown is the biggest fear.
Yep.
But as soon as they start shooting, you've been trained, you've been through it, you've got experience, you know what to do, and you settle down. Now you can talk again. So we go in, we'd fly the mission, drop our bombs, rendezvous out, come back out, hit a tanker again, refuel again so that we had enough gas to get back home, and then we'd go home.
Now, would you do a lot of this refueling and stuff in the air?
Oh yeah.
How in the heck? I've seen this with like I've seen like civilian aircraft and things like that where they do some of the refueling, or I've seen various things on different documentaries and things. But take me through, how the hell do you line yourself up, and they get lined up with you, and that just seems like that would be a very, very difficult task.
Actually, it's difficult the first time you do it just because it's overwhelming. Once you've done it a few times, it's not a whole lot different than flying, in formation with another fighter. But basically, the tanker sets up in a circle or in an orbit.
Yeah.
And then the fighter would come in and join on the tanker. And then you would rotate through. So there's 4 airplanes that are on one tanker. The lead would be first. He would pull up underneath the tanker, get into position. There's a nozzle and a little extension boom that comes out of the tanker that plugs into the receptacle on the airplane, and then they pump the gas. When you're done, they hit a solenoid. It releases the tube, and lead pulls off to the side of the wing. And then the next aircraft, which is number 3, comes in and gets gas.
Yeah. Holy smokes. That is...
And it's once you've done it a few times, it's like you're looking up instead of looking sideways as far as your references for what's forward and aft. But, you get to the point where you can see 1 or 2 inches of movement, and you just correct it 1 or 2 inches instead of waiting until it's 2 or 3 feet.
That's awesome. That's awesome. We've got a great guest with us today. He joins us live here on Skype audio to discuss some of the different aircrafts. Glenn Nielsen with us today. He is, of course, flown 200 combat missions. He's the Advanced Distinguished Flying Cross 7 times. Master's degree in International Relations. He's also active in local, state, and national chapters of the PPA, which is the Professional Photographers of America. And he has done a lot in the photography world. Let's talk about that. You've written a book, Photobomb, Take Your Family Photos from Ordinary to Outstanding. Tell me a little bit about this.
Okay, the purpose of that book was to take people that are using cell phones or low-end DSLR cameras.
Yeah.
Don't know a lot about photography, but they like pictures and they want to have good pictures. And the entire purpose of that is to explain to the more or less lay person what the physics and the technology of photography is, what makes a lens work. And it's not technical at all. It's basic information of what you can do to make your picture look better just because you're aware of one simple little thing. As an example, if you're taking pictures of a person and there's a window behind them and it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon and you're in a dark room, when you take that picture, their face, their body is going to be pretty much dark, very, very dark.
Yep.
Because the camera is going to expose for the outside light. If you take that person and rotate 90 degrees so that the light is raking across them instead of being behind them, you get a great picture.
That's awesome.
If you turn them completely around 180 degrees, then you're going to have the bright light in their face and they're going to be squinting. So you don't want to do that. And these are basic things, you know, what you can do just by understanding what light does to you and for you.
We've got a great guest with us today. Now, with this book, what do you want readers to take away from your writing?
Well, I would like them to take away from the book the fact that there's a lot that goes into photography. It's not a matter of, I got a camera for Christmas, I've got a website for New Year's, and I'm a professional photographer.
Yeah.
It's a lot more than that. When I made up my mind I was going to, my third career was going to be in photography, I spent probably 2 to 3 years before I got to the point where I could say I'm a professional without choking. And there's just that much about it.
Wow. Now, Glenn, before we let you go here, where can people pick up the book and get in touch with you if they would like?
Well, the book is available on either Amazon or Barnes & Noble. And you probably need to say Photobomb, author Glenn Nielsen, in order to find it. Maybe, you know, if you're having difficulty finding it. If people want to contact me, I am available at Glenn, Glenn, at Pics, Picsinthe, Glenn, Glenn.com.
Awesome stuff. Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate you making time for us today, and thanks for coming on the broadcast. Appreciate it, my friend.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Definitely. We'll be in touch. Have yourself a happy holiday. Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you. You too.
Appreciate it. Thank you, brother. We are going to take a timeout. A little musical interlude here. And we'll be back with more here on our big broadcast. It is top of the hour time. We're back after